everybody. Thanks again for joining me. Karl here. And today I am with my good friend and fellow Chicagoan, Patty Campagna. Good to see you, Patty.
Hi, Karl. So great to be here.
Yeah, this is really fun. We have worked together in the context of Entrepreneurs Organization. But, one thing I have not gotten to do is dive deep with you about coaching and leadership and your actual business work that you do day to day. So I'm super excited to get into this. Now, I was looking around at your background before this, and one thing I didn't realize, as much, 'cause I knew your work with entrepreneurs, but you've also worked with Fortune 100 leaders and big companies as well. Um, but what drew you to coaching, and where did you kind of get your start on this?
Well, it's funny that you ask. I was just talking with a friend at coffee this morning, a fellow entrepreneur, and I didn't, when I was younger, coaching wasn't really a thing, right? I mean, only sports coaching. And so when I was younger, I got my start in corporate banking and I was brought in through a management training program. So I was getting all this fancy leadership and management and customer service training, and they were really investing in us as future leaders. And I would sit in those classes enthralled, hanging on every word. And I thought, man, I want to be a corporate trainer. That's really this. I want to be the woman at the front of the room, until I looked around the room with all the bankers who were sitting in there, bored out of their gourd. They didn't want to be there. They couldn't wait to go check their Blackberries or run to the payphone bank, because that's how old I am, outside of the training room. And I was like, well, man, I do not want to be a corporate trainer if nobody wants to be sitting there in the room, right? That doesn't feel very good. Plus, you're not really I didn't think, impacting long and lasting change. And so I kind of sat on, that was always in the back of my mind. And so it wasn't until 15 years later that coaching was becoming, or maybe by that point was already a big thing. But I learned, I'm like, wait a minute, you could be a professional coach? That's a thing? And so that was when I was like, oh yeah, that's really what I want to do, because now I'm taking, oh, by the way, I've got 15 years of experience that I'm using, plus all of that training, plus it kind of is who I am since I was 12, right? People who know me know that I went to a leadership camp, which sounds really dorky, in middle school, but it was so much fun. All the eighth graders are like, I know it sounds really terrible, but really it'll be the best week of your life. And as cheesy as it is to say, it honestly was. I've been going to this leadership camp since I was 12. Then in high school, I was a junior counselor, and then you're supposed to be done. But somebody got sick when I was in college. And so then I started going as an adult staffer with the rest of the teachers. And I mean, I've been twice pregnant and I have 2 kids. So what got me into coaching? I've been doing all of this work since I was 12. And I only discovered coaching as a field when I was, I don't know how, 30 something.
This gives us a good little bit of context as we get into this, because the meat of what I wanted to talk to you about is leadership as an entrepreneur, because a couple different threads we're going to pull on here, but you've gotten the experience to work with both bigger companies and entrepreneurs as leaders. And I want to talk about some of those differences and similarities, but then also just the leadership is this very intangible sort of quality, right? And it seems to be different in everybody. So anyway, I'm super interested to dive into all this stuff. We will talk also a little bit more about leading teams and what you do professionally, but we'll kind of get to that. Let's start with big company versus entrepreneurial leadership. And again, thinking in the terms of, hey, if I start my own company, how's that different from being, say, a middle manager or even a director at a big company? What are some of the things you notice that are very different that people have to wake up to?
Well, out of the gate, and I started my career in 3 large organizations. One was corporate, one was family owned, and one was nonprofit, but all of them were large. And then I started being an entrepreneur myself and working with entrepreneurs. But the biggest difference was, in a large company, you have to stay in your lane because there's another department and it's their job to do X and Y. And, my role is only Z. So you get really good at only doing Z. And in an entrepreneurial business, your job is A through Z. And so, there is no communications department. Like, that's me, that's Sally. Oh, and I'm also doing this and I'm also doing that. And so you're just people are wearing so many hats in an entrepreneurial organization, and the lines get really blurred, and it can be very confusing. And so, and it's, I don't know, it can be scary and frustrating to be like, wait, this is my job. I don't have experience with that. Oh, you want me to do it? Oh, okay. I guess I'll make it up as I go along.
Right. This is such a good point. I love that you've mentioned this because this was one of the biggest culture shocks for me. I had been an employee at companies where there was only a few employees. So I was I was like sitting right there with the founders at big discussions. And so in a way, I was very close to the entrepreneurs. But when I started my own business, it was like, oh wait, there's no CEO for me to kick this question over to anymore. Like there's no board of advisors, there's no investors to ask about. Like it's just me. Like there's no answer, and it's just me. And that was super hard. I was surprised at how hard that was. Even though I'm a person with high agency and I don't mind making decisions, it was exhausting. Like just constantly making all those decisions. And so I imagine other entrepreneurs have felt that, as well as some of our early employees who also get put in that position where they have to make all these decisions that are outside their realm of expertise.
Because you're used to being able to depend on other teams or there's somebody else who's an expert there. And you've got more people who are going to tell you that you're wrong, or who are going to, help steer you. And so in an entrepreneurial venture, it's very lonely.
Yeah. Okay. So we will get to more advice about this, because I do think there's a lot to go into there, but maybe as a quick, some quick ideas, anything that comes up that like helps entrepreneurs start to get over that, like, oh wait, I've got to make all these decisions, or even help our early employees who are going to make a wide range of decisions. Like, what should we do to kind of prep ourselves for that?
I guess one of my phrases that I feel like I say over and over is, I have to grow myself so that I can grow my team, so that I can grow the business. And it can, if we are the owner entrepreneur, that's that's different than working for an entrepreneur, right? And the distinction is, an owner entrepreneur has to be able to get over their huge fear, right? It's often fear of failure or fear of success, or all of them, because like this is their baby. Everything is riding on this. And that is a massive source of pressure and responsibility. And so nobody else can love my baby like I love my baby. And so we cling to things, and it's very difficult for an owner entrepreneur to let go. But if they don't, they won't grow their people, which will grow their business. They become a really hard bottleneck. If we're working in an entrepreneurial venture, we need to understand a little bit of the headspace of the entrepreneur. And it really comes down to building trust with each other. And there's many different ways that we can talk about that. But
one thing, this just came up in a conversation I had with a guest yesterday, is that as entrepreneurs, we get so attached to our clients, our early ways of doing things, our early sort of philosophy in the business, that we often are blind to the fact that we have to change in order to grow. And I say we because he and I were sort of commiserating over, we both felt that way at different points, where we've been like, well, I always did it this way. And an employee comes in and suggests a different way. And I go, no, that's not our way. And it's they could totally be right.
It's really tough. The ego is such a mass, and I'm a woman and I have an ego too. The time I was the best manager, so I'll go back to corporate banking, which I am not a corporate banker, but I was the best manager then. I had 20 people on my team. And the reason I was the best manager at the age of 22 is that I did not know how to do my employees' jobs. I only had to trust that they knew. And so I was the best leader, supporting them, more of as a servant leader to them, right? And a participatory leader with them. And so I was a worse leader. Again, there's a distinction between manager and leader. And in an entrepreneurial venture, we have to be both manager and leader. And managers are often leading downward, right? And we know better. So when I led a team that was doing work that I knew how to do, well, then I was very attached to how they did what they did instead of being more outcome focused, right? And asking, how can I support you? What tools do you need, right? I had to learn to ask better questions.
Totally. That resonates very strongly with myself as well. Because in my journey, it was the first company I started. I knew how to do every role because I did it all at the day. And then the second company I bought, and I didn't know how to do anything. And it was a really good wake up call as to like, oh, the team needs help. I can't help. I'm, technically unable to do the work they do. So I literally have to just say, what can I do to help you guys? What resources do you need? How do we structure things in a way that gets you those resources? And it was, initially it's challenging, but now in hindsight, it's like, wow, that team learned to run themselves way better, faster than I would have had I been in there stepping in.
Absolutely. That I think that's one of the biggest downfalls with entrepreneurs when they start their business is that they just get in the way.
Yeah, totally. Another thing that struck me early on as an entrepreneur is I had in my head this archetype of the entrepreneurial leader who was up in front of big rooms at conferences. Now, I do like speaking, so maybe I'm a little bit of that type, but like the big visionary who has this, $10 billion idea, the inspirational type leader.
Like
And I
Steve
think that's
Jobs or something.
right, the Steve Jobs. Yeah, that's a good archetype. So that's one type of entrepreneurial leader. But I've now learned after meeting lots of very successful entrepreneurs who don't do that there's lots of other types of successful entrepreneurial leaders. I would like to hear from you, like in your experience, what are some of those other archetypes or kind of ways that entrepreneurs tend to be good leaders, even if they're not the big person talking on stage?
Yeah. Well, great question. I think, and we can get caught up in like semantics of if they're a transformational leader, are they an authoritative leader or a servant leader? For entrepreneurial businesses, it really doesn't matter. What matters is, are they an authentic leader utilizing their strengths in the best way for the business? Because I think the type of leader that we need to be depends on the stage that the business is in. And so in the very early stages of a business, the leader does have to be more hands-on and might be more authoritative. As the business is growing, right, and the leader is trying to stand back, they can, ideally, I'm kind of with you, we want to be more of a transformational leader, but it really depends on the stage of their business and what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of that whole mantra of what got you here won't get you there, where, the people who often start a very small business and it's, just them and some customers and, maybe a couple freelancers are very different in their style and their skills than the people who run 10,000 person companies. And it's very rare to see an entrepreneur go all the way from founder to going public or something. It's so rare that it's like worth, like it gets noticed when it happens.
And they start to get bored too, right? Because the beginning, I talk about hunters and farmers, and a lot of entrepreneurs are hunters, and it's exciting for them to go out and like new, fresh fields are very exciting to them. Process and structure and routine and consistency is farming, and farming is boring. And so, I do think that's part of what I'm doing as a coach is like, okay, what is important to you and what do you want and what's your natural style, and knowing when enough is enough.
Yeah, I that resonates really hard with me as well. And so I think something I'm hearing here that I really like is this idea that you want to figure out what you are strong at as an entrepreneur and as a leader, and then lean into that really hard. Because as something I've observed personally is like when I'm forcing myself to do things that I don't do well and I don't like to do, I just lose energy really quickly. Like I'm in an hour of sending the same cold email over and over, I'm like, dude, get me out of here. I want to go watch a TV show.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
so boring, right?
yeah.
Whereas an hour of having a conversation like this, I'm ready to go have 6 more. Like I'm good to go. Like this recharges me. So like there's certain things, and what I found for me is this: what you're saying is find ways to optimize your day around doing those things that give you energy, and outsource everything else, because there's other people who are good at those things that will get energy from it.
I will say, yesterday I was with a group and we were talking about introversion, extroversion, right? And I'm also a Myers-Briggs facilitator, so I like those codes. So there are times where I do have to do a few tasks that drain me, right? Ideally, I want somebody else to do all my billing. I should never be doing any of my billing. When I do it, I'm terrible at it. But there are times, especially for really introverted entrepreneurs, where they do have to go out and be with the people and shake the hands and kiss the babies and, motivate the team a little bit. But they're not going to be like, if they're doing that all the time, it's not authentic to them. And so it might be more having one-on-one lunches or brown bag lunches or, connecting over coffee with people, doing it in a way that feels authentic. So again, there's some times where we do have to act a little bit out of our natural styles, but as much as we can to be leaning into our natural preferences and styles and talents, that's always the best.
Yeah, I think it's this fine line of like doing things that you're naturally good at and give you energy and things like that, mixed with you have to be growing as well, like you said, or else your business stagnates, you stagnate, and you're not gonna like get to that next level. And that growth might be it often means, in my experience, doing uncomfortable things a
That's
little
the
more than
only
you
way
want
you
to.
grow. Yeah, the only way,
So
definition
yeah.
of growth.
Right. So I think there's like this balance here we're trying to strike of like, if 8 hours a day I'm trying to slam my head against the wall doing the worst things that I drain my energy, it's like, no, not going to be sustainable. But if I can budget myself some amount of time to push into an area that I don't find comfortable, that's probably a really good thing for me in the long run. Yeah. We've talked a little bit already about what entrepreneurs struggle with when it comes to leadership. There's a bunch of things I have seen from entrepreneurs who are varying levels. I don't think leadership is like this, you're good or bad. It's very much a spectrum, right? And very much situational too. But what are some of the things that you see holding entrepreneurs back or struggling with when it comes to leading and growing teams?
A lot of times, again, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be people pleasers. Maybe I'm just speaking as myself, but in people pleasers, we want to be liked, right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs, some people need validation around their decisions, right? And so it can be very scary to make the tough decisions. And honestly, you're having to bet on the future that you cannot predict. And so inherently, it's filled with uncertainty. So you have to be willing to take those risks. I learned many, many years ago, sorry to say this, but it doesn't necessarily take brains to be an entrepreneur. It just takes, I have a more crass way of saying it, but the nicer way is just a really high risk tolerance, right? Like you need something of steel in order to weather the storm. And so it takes a certain amount of self-assurance, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't. I mean, again, we're all individuals and we all have our own story. But, if I do everybody's strength finders, not all entrepreneurs have incredibly high confidence. And so if their confidence is somewhere in the middle or lower, they're constantly looking for validation. And so it's hard for them to make decisions. And leading an entrepreneurial venture means you've got to bet on a future that you can't predict and see. And you've got to be willing to risk, because what comes first, the chicken or the eggs? And in order to handle that business, we need a better team, a bigger team, and sometimes a better team, right? Right people, right seats is huge, and that's hard. Those are hard things to do. And also in entrepreneurial ventures, a lot of times these people are our friends. Sometimes these people are our family, and they are the wrong people, but they were the right people for where we were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. You're bringing up a lot of interesting things I've gone through. I mean, I remember the first time I decided I was going to increase prices on existing customers, which sounds really, again, I'm a few years into this now. I've done it plenty of times and it doesn't scare me nearly as much. But the first time, it scares every entrepreneur. I've met people who never increase prices in 10 years because they're so afraid of this situation. Because you're going to possibly lose one or two. You may not lose them all, but you're maybe going to lose some. And it's a little bit of a personal like relationship you have with these people. Often they're your early customers, the ones that you closed first that helped you get started. But they're often like not the ones who are going to get you to the next level. And at some point you got to decide like, all right, we got to either move on or bring raise them up to the right price. So anyway, I just remember going through that, like, there's no way to know how to do this. There's no validate. Nobody's going to tell me, Karl, this will be fine. Just do it. Like nobody can tell me that for sure. You just have to do it. You pull the Band-Aid off
And hiring people sometimes who are smarter than you, right? Sometimes you're hiring people as you're growing, then I want somebody who's done this before. And so I want, in this certain area. And so those people know more than us sometimes. And so that's a huge ego experience for some entrepreneurs.
Yeah, ego is definitely one of those things that kind of gets wrapped up in fear too, I think, where like a big part of fear is like loss of your own personal like self-worth and this like ego you've built up for yourself, right? So there's something
And a
tied
need
together.
to be needed, right? And so, like this whole problem solving thing, the more that we can get away from solving other people's problems, right? Because we're not empowering them, right? I do a lot of work with the drama triangle, right? And if I show up always as the hero, which feels really good and secure for an entrepreneur to show up and be the hero, and I get to feel like, oh yes, I'm still needed, I still have it, and my red cape behind me is still nice and strong. But then I'm not empowering the people around me and I'm not helping them grow. So I've got to stop solving their problems. And so like when you were saying, when you bought the business where you didn't know how to do it, you had to ask them, well, what do you need? How will you solve your problem? And a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember, first of all, I'll take a quick pause for those of you who aren't familiar. There's a concept called the Karpman, right? Drama triangle. I love that instrument or that tool. And if you don't know, it's kind of it's a triangle, so it's 3 points, and they're in any conflict. I'm going to summarize it and you can correct me if I'm wrong. In any conflict, there tend to be 3 roles, right? There's a hero, a villain, and a victim. And anytime there's a conflict, people are going to play all 3 of these roles or some degree of all these roles. And so that often looks like employee comes to me and says, Karl, I just can't close any sales this month. What's going on? And it's like, they're the victim. All right, who's the villain? And they're going to probably point blame on, the market just sucks, or the other guy's getting all the good calls, and I'm going to be the hero, quote unquote. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, well, let me give you a good one here. Let me pull one over from them, and I'm coming in to solve their problem. Okay, so we've just played out all 3 of those roles. It sounds good to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I helped this guy. That's great, right? But now what have I done? What have I done, Patty? I've just done what to this person?
You've enabled his victim behavior. And so
that's right.
A lot of times entrepreneurial leaders will say, well, I can't find good people these days, right? I can't find people to solve their own problems, but it's because I've trained them not to. I've trained them. And sometimes I've empowered them to lead the marketing efforts or to run this area, but then I go in and I undermine their work. So really, I've trained them, hey, don't do it because the boss is going to come in and do it his way at the 11th hour anyway. And so we're training them just to hang out. And instead of, the next reference is David Emerald's Empowerment Dynamic, great book, The Power of TED. And instead of showing up as a hero, I need to show up as a coach, which is what I was doing at the bank when I didn't really know how to do the job. Hey, what do you think you need to do to solve your problem? How can I support you? Right? And so instead of being the victim, they are their own creator. And so it's an environment in our culture. Either we've got blame and lack of accountability, or we have ownership and accountability. And so that happens when we show up as a coach, or we show up as a challenger when we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And I love this kind of thinking because, again, it brings up these problems I had early on, and I still struggle with it. I'm not going to say I'm free of this, like nobody is, right? But I remember like coming into these interactions with employees and they'd ask me, oh, Karl, what should I do here? What should I do here? And I realized at one point, like I was making so many micro decisions every day that it was just impossible to function. And the team was constantly blocked by me. And I don't remember exactly how this happened, probably through a number of conversations and just realizing that I was doing this wrong, that like, oh wait, I just can't answer these questions anymore. Like I just have to, have to like just sit on it. And the hard part is you have to build enough security. The employee has to feel secure enough that they can screw up some things. And like, so I had to just constantly say, I'm not going to answer that, or like, I don't know what the answer is here, but if you want to try something, you tell me what you're going to try, you go do it, and then we'll see what happens in 3 months or 2 months or whatever the timeline is. And it really, now I'm very upfront with employees about this, where on day one when they get hired, I'm like, I'm not going to answer a lot of your questions, like except for very basic, like what does this company do, that kind of thing. Like I'm going to make you go figure it out and tell me, and then if you're wrong completely, I'm going to try to help you, but I'm not going to answer your questions. And they just like, some people it's like, oh God, like this is scary. Other people are like, all right, great, let's do it.
And as long as there's trust, right? So, I work a lot with high performing teams, or that's what we're striving to get towards. And, are you familiar with Project Aristotle that Google did? So Google did a whole study on what makes for a high performing work team. And they spent all the money and they brought in all the researchers and the number crunchers and the shrinks and all the doctors and scientists. And what they found was the number one factor on one of their teams that contributed to high performance was psychological safety, which I think is pretty phenomenal, right? Which kind of then I match that back to Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. Trust is at the foundation of any team. And so psychological safety, when you're empowering your employee, if you screw up, I've got your back. You're not going to get fired for giving me the wrong answer. Now, there does come a certain point where there's accountability, right? But in terms of being able to speak the truth and say what's really going on, I work with, where I see a lot of teams and where they don't have high trust and they don't have authentic and transparent conversations with each other. I can see it happening. And especially in bigger businesses, we create our little fiefdoms, right? And there's not alignment and there's not camaraderie and trust amongst everybody.
Yeah, I think it's inherently harder in larger organizations when you can't align incentives as tightly as you can in entrepreneurial ones. I think it's one of the advantages we have as entrepreneurial organizations with, say, less than 100 or 200 people, is just like, you can kind of get everyone in a room and say, look, we all need to do X, and all of our goals are going to trickle down from that. And if you feel like you're working on something that doesn't do that, then raise your hand and say something. And like, honestly, in a 200 person organization or smaller, it's relatively easy to get that
Very,
feedback.
very nimble. And transparency
exactly.
can be easy.
Right. But I could see how, we work with some publicly traded companies and huge organizations where we're, a service provider for them. And I just see the dysfunctions you're talking about. Like, this team over here is trying to get towards this goal, which is totally unaligned with this team over here. Nobody will share any time or resources.
They're competing for resources. Yeah.
So we can avoid that toxicity by being small, which is good. But I do think one of the things I struggle with personally, though, right now that I'm trying to get better at as we grow is like being very clear and talking about the vision I have for the company enough that other people get it too. So what I mean is, I'm often in my head, I know what the vision is. And I like to talk, so I talk plenty, but I feel like I don't always take the time to present it to everybody at the right levels. What do we like? Do you have any way of, like, for entrepreneurs to kind of put those guardrails in place to help us understand, do people get the vision? Like, am I saying it the right way enough times? Like, is this, like, how do we solve that problem?
I think you have to ask your people, right? Like, what do you think? Where do you think we're going? And have them, if they can articulate it back to me, then I've done a good job of articulating it to them. If it's on the wall, if it's broad, it has to be constant, right? Kind of a relentless pursuit of the vision and articulating it. People need to hear it, that adage 7 times in order to hear it the first time. also people hear things differently. And we're different types of learners. So people need to see it in action. People need to hear it. People need to have all of their senses as much as they can involved in understanding the vision.
Yeah. Yeah. The communication, like just reiterating communication is something I've learned the hard way. And what I find, there's that adage of like 7 times you have to say things. I think that's probably a good rule of thumb, rough estimate. But with some people, I have to say it 20 times. With
I
other people, I
know.
say it like 3, like it feels like it's a huge range.
So people hear what they want to hear
Right.
sometimes, right? And then it's a matter of, are they listening, or at what level are they listening, or are they invested in it? Who knows, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, there is at some point. You already said this. Like at some point, it's not just you as a leader that's failing; it's the person is failing, and you have to hold them accountable. And like again, it's a fine line, and we're always trying to walk it. But yeah, it is a challenge for me because I tend to want to think. I said that once last week. We should be done with it. That's not how it
Right. Well,
works.
I feel that way as a parent too, right? I've already
Yeah.
told you this.
Right.
Don't you know this? And the
Oh my God.
problem or the opportunity, like we're having the conversations in our head so much. It's kind of like the stereotypical marriage thing. Well, he should just know that I want this, right? And of course he doesn't know. And I feel like I've asked for it, but maybe the reality is not as much. So the only way I can know is by asking the other people to share
Yeah.
it back.
Yeah. That's it. And that kind of comes to like one of these tactical things that you can do as a leader, which is just talk to more people in the organization more often. This is something I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, and myself too, which is like making the time to go have those conversations because we're so busy. We got so many other things we're doing. And like, I don't know if you have a good way to kind of put that in perspective for people, but like, that's something I struggle with personally. And I know a lot of other people do too.
We need to grow ourselves to grow our people. Our people will grow the business. So if I'm doing like my people have to be first. They have to be first. That includes customers and vendors, right? But specifically my team, they are the ones who should be doing the work. If I'm doing too much work, then probably somebody else could be doing that. Wouldn't it be better if I could train somebody else to do it so that I could be really pouring water onto the plant so that the seeds are all growing?
I love this. I mean, I think your overall philosophy here, which is really resonating with me, is like when you're working, when I'm working on myself as an entrepreneur to grow as a person, to grow as a leader, to increase my capacity to take risks and do big things and ambitious things, that is what helps me grow the team, that grows the business itself, not just Karl, work harder.
Yeah. And I'm a really hard worker too. In fact, in my strength finders, my achiever is still up there, and I hate it now. Like the older I get, the less I want that. Because you know what I've discovered? There's a lot of people who work way smarter than me. And I want to be working smarter, not harder. And I feel like I got a lot of my success by outworking people in, my first 15 years of my career. And I still do it now. But boy, my mantra for myself is smarter, not harder. And smarter means I show up as a leader, not as a doer. When I'm doing too much, I'm not doing my job.
I feel like you do a lot, though.
I know.
I do feel like you're out there doing a lot. I mean, no, we've interacted. Our work mostly has been through Entrepreneurs Organization, which we can talk about more later. But it is interesting. Like your job or your practice is very much dependent on you kind of being the face of things a lot of times.
It
Like, how do you?
is.
And a lot of
And
and a lot of businesses are like this. So I'm curious how you kind of how are you squaring that circle for yourself, or how do you make that work?
honestly, it's a conversation that I have inside of myself every day, because I know that my business leading teams could be way bigger, right? And there's definitely days where I'm like, man, but I've coached myself back. And at least the story that I tell myself right now is what I really love. Like I'm actually doing what I love every day, almost every day. And the other coaches, that I have to say to myself is, if it's not a hell yes, the answer has to be no. And I am working to say no more and more often to certain things that are a little bit more draining for me, right? I get on a plane a lot. And I don't mind getting on a plane, but I'm not always getting on a plane for work that's filling up leading teams. So I'm working very diligently and intentionally on that. Um, I'm right where I want to be. And I really am. And I've got 2 kids, right? I mean, the other job that I have is parent. And let's face it, at the end of their life, nobody wishes that they worked more. And I'm the daughter of an entrepreneur, and I watched my dad at the end of his life. And here's something that's kind of sad. Well, first of all, he lost his marriage over how hard he worked, right? So was that worth it? I don't think so. We could argue that. Um, and at the end of his life, we can thank COVID for some of that, but like nobody there even knew what they knew a little bit about what he did, but like that was not even there at the end of his life. All of the blood and sweat and hours and tears that went into his business didn't even make. Like I know that some people in Chicago at the Bar Association raised the glass to him, but like that was it. So my most important job is parent, and my kids are not easy. And so I am making choices on a daily basis that like, are very authentic and real for me.
Yeah. This is one of those amazing things about being an entrepreneur, though, that I think is extremely rare in careers, especially high driving careers or like ambitious careers, which is you do get a lot more leeway to decide the pace, the scale, the trade-offs that you want to make. And, again, like if you're in, I have a family member who works at a very large law firm and is, like tracking that like year over year work to maybe get partner in 5-10 years, whatever the timeline is. And it's like, it's all about billable hours. You get told exactly how many you got to have for the next 10-20 years, and then you will probably make partner because very few people can actually get there. It's like, just like they don't have an option. Whereas again, for you and I, and most people listening, like part of this, the thing we have as entrepreneurs that we really like should use because you have it is optionality to like stay a size that you are comfortable with, or to keep growing and figure out ways to trade your role into something, else that you like. There's lots of options, but it's just a very unique situation, I think.
Yeah. The freedom that can come from being an entrepreneur is immense, can be immense. But a lot of entrepreneurs don't always get that freedom. And instead they feel trapped, right? And so it really is, that elusive balance that we search for.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about becoming a better leader. So if you listen this far, you see the potential in being a better leader, right? Like tactically, what do we do to become a better leader? Like what are some of the things I can seek out? I think this is where like obviously working with you at leading teams, that's one, track, right? What other things can entrepreneurs do to kind of develop themselves as leaders to start working on this stuff?
Well, there's tons of books out there, right? So, which I think are valid, right? Like first you have to kind of
everybody
learn.
learns differently, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and some people books is more powerful than others. So yeah.
Books, whether you're listening to them or reading them or just becoming aware of what is our role in all this or what are concepts that might help me, right? So there's so many that that can be daunting. So being able to focus in. I usually start with people on like self-assessment, right? So, and there's tools out there, whether you're using DISC or Culture Index or Predictive Index. I use Myers-Briggs, I use Strength Finders, I use Colby. So I think also getting in touch with our own core values. Who am I? What do I stand for? What's important to me? How do I want to make a difference in this world? Or how do I want to use myself as a leadership, person, as a leader? And so I think that I guess there's a lot of different ways to grow as a leader. A lot of it comes down to mindset and finding out ways in which we want to grow as a leader. I like to use Strength Finders a lot. I like Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders because I like taking an individualized approach to Who are the people on my team? What do the people on my team need? What does my team or business need to grow? And so it becomes very customized for each person. I'm sorry that I don't have like a one size fits all answer to how people grow with that. I think that's why leadership is such a broad topic, right? For me, it starts with self-awareness and emotional intelligence, being aware of, you need the skills and the knowledge, but then you also need the mindset and awareness of how to grow as a person.
Yeah, yeah, that resonates with me, and that for me personally has been the most helpful thing. I remember one of the most impactful books I read in college was Now Discover Your Strengths, and doing the Strengths Finder during a leadership. I remember it was like a course or something, and it stuck with me. And I do it every few years just to kind of remind myself of like what I am and see how it shifts a little bit. There's some things that have kind of shifted a bit as I've grown. But I do think like knowing yourself is kind of like this fundamental thing, like being self-aware of where your blind spots are and where you're good and where you're not so good and all that huge. The other things that kind of come in there is like working with a coach one-on-one, like someone who is like a professional and kind of guide you. This always been helpful to me. I've done it a couple times. I can't recommend it enough. Finding peer groups too, another big one, like people who are also at your level of being an entrepreneurial leader, but trying to like get through that. For me, it's Entrepreneurs Organization, but there's plenty of others like Vistage and mastermind groups, whatever. And then the other thing I would add is sometimes helpful are like these different frameworks too. You do Bloom coaching, right? Is that like, I know that's leadership adjacent. Like, how does that kind of tie in here too?
For a lot of leaders, as they're trying to grow their business, they start to get frustrated because it doesn't have the momentum that they wanted, right? And putting systems into place sounds hard, and that's really not their strength anyway, right? And so Bloom is a structured framework that helps people prioritize and communicate back to how do we know that we're communicating the vision well enough, right? And so it's putting in a structured process in place that then allows for accountability and teamwork. And, it's a rhythm to it. And we're addressing team health. We're addressing all of the major components of running a business that, some leaders do some of them well, but we need to be able to hone in on all of them. And so I really like it because it helps give people the boost that they needed. I like it because it focuses a lot on the people, but we're working on the systems and the process and the data and what's the final goal, right? When in leadership, we're always like, where are we now and where are we going? How are we going to get there? What's it going to take for us to get there? So it really puts the whole machine into motion.
Yeah, and it kind of has it has this transparency too to the where are those 2 points and who's in charge of what things, right? And that's again often this is maybe the more tactical side of leadership. Maybe we're getting into management a bit, but it's still important because it is like fundamentally people need to know where they fall within the organization and direction in order to do their job well, but also to feel secure and trust and all that stuff.
Structure and clarity was number 3 in the Project Aristotle findings, right? So first was psychological safety. Second was dependability. Third was structure and clarity. We need to know who is doing what and what are the expectations. I'll finish out the model since I started it. 4 was meaning, so that an employee's role has meaning to them. They could understand how their role mattered. And 5 is impact. We understand even if I'm producing widgets that then get turned into something else, I know what the end user, I know how the work that we do fits into the whole. And so that's another thing that in the structure. So yeah, it's all intertwined. So the reason, you had asked a little bit about leading teams, and I do a lot of coaching, and I coach individuals, and whether it's business owners or leaders or even just professionals in transition, doesn't matter. Coaching is kind of the same, well, slightly different depending on who it is. But what Bloom does is it helps me, the coach, get past the leader. right? It helps me get to the entire team so that the entire unit, because sometimes if I'm coaching one person, that one person might or might not do what we talk about, right? If I'm coaching now a whole team, now we've got the positive peer pressure of the whole team, having the collective conversation, having the setting the group transparent goals, having the impactful weekly meetings. We call them the Bloom weekly meetings, talking about the right things, measuring the right things, so it leads to greater impact.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I think structure is another huge area where some entrepreneurs get this naturally and they're very structured people, right? And then others, it is much more of like, especially the types that are kind of the free flowing creative types that just bounce around from idea to idea. Like this is not me. I'm a very structured analytical person, but like I've met plenty of good entrepreneurs who are like that. They need a system and rails and probably someone to be their kind of integrator type who operates more. But like either way, like finding that structure is a huge part of like maximizing your potential as a leader, because it kind of keeps you on, or keeps your team on track with what really matters. You can have the random ideas here and there. That's fine. But like, those are great fuel for the long term, but you can't live in the random ideas.
Well, and you had asked at the beginning about what sets large companies apart from smaller companies. And in larger companies, by the time they get that large, they have systems, right? They've got whatever they call it, right? But they've got their QBRs, or they've got all these structures in place. And a lot of smaller, because we're just so nimble and we're making it up as we go, or whatever our story is, a lot of smaller businesses don't have that structure. The other thing is, in a small business with like the owner, I put like, I'm pointing to my head. You can't see me on a podcast, but if you chopped off the head of a business, if the owner is running it, the business dies. And in a larger business, you can chop off that head and everything is still running. And so we need to be able to grow a business that runs without the owner. And so the structure, I had one coaching client years ago. He's like, I just need the scaffolding. I need the framework. I need the scaffolding so that then I know where I can veer off, because too much scaffolding is boring, but I need the structure in place so that I can go be me and I know that this stuff is going to get done. And so Bloom or any of the other systems, is a nice structure so that if the leader does get hit by a bus or wants to go, God forbid, start a new venture, right? Because that's what's exciting to most
That's what us hunters
entrepreneurial
do.
leaders is,
Yeah.
I'm bored with this one now. I want to go start something else. We need to be able to trust that the work is going to get done, and that gets done with a system.
Yeah, this is great, Patty. Last question I have. This is, as we've already alluded to, there's a lot of good books out there. So I'll put some constraints in place so that you have to answer it in a more interesting way. What's something you personally have read in the last 3 months that made an impact on you, or was an interesting read that maybe you didn't expect? And this could be professional or otherwise.
Resonant Leadership is one that I've read recently, and I just like how it really is about leading with heart, right? Instead of necessarily leading with our head, which for some people that sounds really crazy. For me, again, I'm a Myers-Briggs person, so I'm a strong feeler. And a lot of the work that I do with entrepreneurs is also building their emotional intelligence and learning how to resonate with people. And when leadership is too heady, it often misses the mark. And it's really about being a really good listener.
Oh, this sounds right. I need this. This is my problem. As one of my problems as a leader is I am too analytical, and it's got to be logical, and that's all I want to talk about. And the people who do work operate more on the heart. I just tend to sort of misfire with them all the time.
I think listening is a real, how can we become better leaders? We can talk less and listen more. And we're listening. There's different filters. I mean, I think I need to go read a whole bunch more books or write one on listening. But, there's filters that we can put on. Like listening to fix is a filter that a lot of entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial leaders we need to pull that one off. And we need
I love
to,
that one. That
yeah.
one's so tempting
I
all the time.
know.
Yeah.
Because it feeds our
Oh,
ego so much, but
right.
listening to
Right.
understand, I go back to Stephen Covey, I mean, I didn't even finish the whole book. I read it back when I was in college or right out of college. But like, seek first to understand is an incredibly difficult thing, but a really important thing as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. Patty, good way to end it, because that's something I need to work on personally, but I'm sure a lot of other listeners do too. Patty, we can find out about leading teams at leadingteamsinc.com. Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.